when the Quran is being recited. Inshallah, today we have Rahim Badmos, who's going to read for us. He's one of his school students. Also, as most of you know, tonight we're also here to give condolence to Brother Khalid. His family is gracious. They've also provided food. So please, when we finish this, we're gonna have food, but help them clean up. They're already grieving, so don't let them grieve more by not helping them out, inshallah. And then one last announcement. We have a good turnout today. We want to keep every Friday like this. Many of you have given me the feedback that you look forward to the Friday night Halaqah. In fact, our Quran teacher said there were 3 young kids having conversation after one of the classes this week, and they were talking about what is great about the masjid. And one of the girls, the 7-year-old, said, Friday night halaqahs are great, and the food, right? So we want to make this a family event. So we're looking for sponsors and volunteers for Friday night halaqah. The food is not a big part while we're here. We're here to listen to the Quran, to listen to advice from our sheikh and elders. But the food brings us here because then the families don't have to worry too much about providing dinner at home. So if you feel like you could help support that cause, please come to me and let's keep this going week after week after week, because your kids here really enjoying this and listening to the speeches and having dinner is better than them being anywhere else. Saturday nights we have kids here. The whole weekend we have activities here. Let your kids build their hearts in the masjid, and it starts from Friday night. It starts every day, but Friday nights more especially. So if you want to sponsor, please see me, or you could talk to Sister Layla, and inshallah. So thank you, and inshallah we'll have dinner together after this.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين. وآخرين منهم ما يلحق بهم وهو العزيز الحكيم. ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم. مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوا أسفارا بئس مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآيات الله والله لا يهدي. قل يا أيها الذين هادوا إن زعمتم أن من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين. ولا يتمنونه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم الظالمين قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون صدق الله.
تكبير. تكبير.
You have such a beautiful voice. Good job. In a second.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We begin in the name of Allah Azza wa Jalla, the most gracious, the most merciful. We invoke Him to send His peace and His blessings upon Prophet Muhammad, upon his family and companions, and whomsoever follows his way until the end of time. So the topic of today is building on the khutbah that we spoke about today. If I could get just a quick show of hands, how many people attended the khutbah this afternoon? Okay. So the gist of the khutbah today was basically about building a connection with Allah Azza wa Jalla that kind of transcends the constant need for a rush of inspiration. And the culture of today, you know, when we send posts through, when we share posts through Instagram, through Twitter, those WhatsApp forwards, it's as though we create this dependency upon this rush of inspiration that comes from hearing an interesting quote or seeing a very moving video where you see someone cry or something like that. And it creates almost this kind of dependency upon this, emotionally stimulating thing. And there's nothing wrong with finding that emotional stimulation, that spiritual stimulation, that inspiration. What becomes problematic is when we develop a dependency on such things, such that when those things are removed, when you don't have that inspirational quote, when you're going through difficulty, what is the grounds on which we have our faith? That if that's the only thing that we build our faith upon, these like jolts of inspiration that come, when those things are removed, when the khatib, you don't like the khatib for the day, or you don't like the ones giving the halaqah for today, or it's been a while that you've seen something inspirational, you still worship Allah in those moments. And if we build our foundation on something that extends beyond just that need for constant, that addiction to novelty and new information, then once we move away from that need, then inshallah we have a strong ground to build our faith upon. Even though it's appropriate and it's a good thing for us to constantly create that kind of atmosphere in which we feel that high of iman. Okay? But the real issue that we were tackling in the khutbah is basically overcoming that dopamine addiction to new content. Because a lot of the times in our edutainment kind of environment where we educate, but it always seems to need to be in some kind of entertaining fashion, we treat Islam as if it's this box of secrets. And people, when they speak about Islam, it's like, here's this thing that you've never heard about before. And so it's supposed to stimulate you, and the first time you hear it, it's like, wow. The second time you hear it, it's like, oh yeah, that was really interesting. By the third or fourth time, you're like, yeah, I know this. But we don't treat these kinds of information as it's a new piece of information, and I've learned it and that's it. But we treat them as the reminders that they should be. Reminding us about the significance of developing a relationship with Allah in stronger bonds. So the discussion of the halaqah today is built upon a question that I think many people have, and that is, why did Allah command humanity to worship Him? Why did Allah command humanity to worship Him? A lot of the times, the way in which this question is asked is, if Allah is not in need of us, then why did Allah create humanity? Or another way that this is asked is, what does Allah stand to benefit from creating humanity? And so the problem here is that within this question is built a premise, is built an assumption. And while it's noble to ask questions and to seek knowledge, it's very, very important that we differentiate between questions that are of value in the structure that they exist in, and questions that don't have value as they're stated. So I'll give you another example. If I ask you how many corners are there in a circle, I phrased it as a question. But does everything that's phrased as a question can be answered without having to kind of take it apart and answer some of those assumptions in there? What is the correct answer to how many corners in a circle? Can you ever answer that question correctly? No. What you have to do is you have to tear it apart and examine what are some of the assumptions there. The same thing is what we have to do here. So the assumption here is that Allah Azza wa Jal is like a human being. That it comes from the premise of this kind of question is that Allah must be like a human being, because when a human being commands us something or asks us something or requests us something, then it comes from some kind of had, comes from some kind of need. And if it doesn't come from some kind of need, then it's abath. It's random, it's without purpose, it's not deliberate. So we think that, is this, if Allah Azza wa Jal has created us, then what is the need that He must have created us? Because our reference point has become ourselves. And we assume that Allah Azza wa Jal is like creation. In the same way that we make Allah like creation, we make ourselves like Allah. In what way? When we place humanity at the center of the world and act as though all standards should be judged from the lens of humanity, not from the lens of Allah Azza wa Jal, the Creator. This is also a fundamental problem in the same question. So Allah Azza wa Jal, He very categorically denies this assumption that Allah Azza wa Jal is in need of worship, and that being the reason why He asks us to worship Him. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I have not created the jinn and humanity except that they worship me. مَا أُرِيدُ مِنْهُمْ مِنْ رِزْقٍ وَمَا أُرِيدُ أَنْ يُطْعِمُونَ. I do not need any provision from them. I don't need them to feed me. If the assumption is that Allah Azza wa Jal has asked you to worship Him so that He can gain something from that, Allah Azza wa Jal categorically denies it. إِنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الرَّزَّاقُ ذُو الْقُوَّةِ الْمَتِينُ. It is Allah Azza wa Jal who provides to other people. He's not in need of anyone. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, إِن تَكْفُرُوا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَنِيٌّ عَنْكُمْ. If you all disobey, if you all disbelieve in Allah, indeed Allah is free of need, most praiseworthy. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَنِيٌّ عَنْكُمْ. Indeed Allah Azza wa Jal is free of need from all of you. وَلَا يَرْضَى لِعِبَادِهِ الْكُفْرَ. But He is not pleased for His servants to disbelieve in Him. وَلَا يَرْضَى لِعِبَادِهِ الْكُفْرَ. وَإِن تَشْكُرُوا يَرْضَهُ لَكُمْ. But if you do show gratitude towards Allah, if you acknowledge Allah Azza wa Jal, if you worship Allah Azza wa Jal, that is something that He finds pleasing for you. Musa, he says to his people, وَقَالَ مُوسَى إِن تَكْفُرُوا أَنْتُمْ وَمَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَغَنِيٌّ حَمِيدٌ. When Musa speaks to his people, because there's this theme that we almost notice from Bani Israel, and it's also mentioned from the Bedouins of the time of the Prophet ﷺ. The people would come saying, we have believed, O Musa, and it is as though they had done a favor to Allah. That, oh Musa, we worshipped Allah, we did this, we accepted you as a prophet, so like, take it easy on us, don't give us so many commands. As if we had just done a favor from Allah Azza wa Jalla. Or Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says about the Bedouins, يَمُنُّونَ عَلَيْكُمْ إِسْلَامَكُمْ. They mention to you as if though they have done a favor to you, that they accepted Islam. فَلِلَّهُ يَمُنُّ عَلَيْكُمْ إِنْ هَدَاكُمْ لِلْإِيمَانِ. Rather, it is the favor of Allah upon you that He guides you to faith. So, وَقَالَ مُوسَى إِن تَكْفُرُوا أَنْتُمْ وَمَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَغَنِيٌّ حَمِيدٌ. Musa says to his people, if you disbelieve, and if everyone in the earth disbelieves, then know that Allah Azza wa Jalla is free of need and praiseworthy. Allah says, also denies, so in these ayat, denies that He's in need of being worshipped. He also denies that this request comes abathan, without any purpose or utility. Allah says, أَفَحَسِبْتُمْ أَنَّمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ عَبَثًا وَأَنَّكُمْ إِلَيْنَا لَا تُرْجَعُونَ. Do you assume, have you thought that Allah has created you without purpose, and that you would not be returned back to Allah? فَتَعَالَى اللَّهُ الْمَلِكُ الْحَقِّ. The assumption that you would think Allah does anything without it being deliberate, without purpose, and without wisdom, Allah exalts Himself beyond such an assumption. فَتَعَالَى اللَّهُ الْمَلِكُ الْحَقِّ. May Allah be exalted above any kind of assumption that Allah does anything without a wisdom. فَتَعَالَى اللَّهُ الْمَلِكُ الْحَقِّ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ رَبُّ الْعَرْشِ الْكَرِيمِ. May Allah be exalted, the King, the truth. There is no one worthy of worship besides Him, and He is the Lord of the noble throne. There's also a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فيما روى عن الله تبارك وتعالى أنه قال: يا عبادي إني حرمت الظلم على نفسي. The Prophet ﷺ narrates on behalf of Allah تبارك وتعالى. Allah says, يا عبادي إني حرمت الظلم على نفسي وجعلته بينكم محرما فلا تظالموا. O my servants, indeed I have made injustice and oppression impermissible upon myself, and I have made it impermissible upon all of you. So do not oppress one another. يا عبادي كلكم ضال إلا من هديته فاستهدوني أهدكم. O my servants, all of you are misguided except those of you whom I have guided. So seek guidance of me, I will guide you. This is a conditional statement. If you seek the guidance of Allah, Allah will give you guidance. That is the promise of Allah. Ya ibadi, kullukum ja'irun illa min at'amtu. O my servants, all of you are hungry except those whom I have fed. فَاسْتَطْعِمُونِي أُطْعِمْكُمْ. So seek food from me, I will give you food. يَا عِبَادِي كُلُّكُمْ عَارًا إِلَّا مَنْ كَسَوْتُهُ فَاسْتَكْسُونِي أَكْسُكُمْ. O my servants, all of you are naked except those whom I have clothed. So seek clothing of me, I will give you clothing. يَا عِبَادِي إِنَّكُمْ تُخْطِئُونَ بِاللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ وَأَنَا أَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ جَمِيعًا فَاسْتَغْفِرُونِي أَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ. O my servants, indeed you sin and you make mistakes بِاللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ, during the night and day. وَأَنَا أَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ جَمِيعًا. But I forgive all sins. So seek forgiveness of me, Allah says, I will surely forgive you. يَا عِبَادِي إِنَّكُمْ لَن تَبْلُغُوا ضَرِّي فَتَضُرُّونِي. O my servants, you will not be able to harm me in any way. You will not be able to reach the level in which you can cause me any kind of harm. As in, if you disbelieve in Allah, if you refuse to worship Him when He commands that you worship Him, have you harmed Allah? Allah tells you you do not have the capacity to harm Allah. So in your worship of Allah, you have done nothing to increase the kingdom of Allah. In your refusal to worship Allah, you have done nothing to diminish the kingdom of Allah. وَلَن تَبْلُغُوا نَفْعِي فَتَنْفَعُونِي. And you do not have the capacity to benefit me, such that you offer me any benefit. يَا عِبَادِي لَوْ أَنَّ أَوَّلَكُمْ وَآخِرَكُمْ وَإِنسَكُمْ وَجِنَّكُمْ كَانُوا عَلَى أَتْقَى قَلْبِ رَجُلٍ وَاحِدٍ مِنكُمْ مَا زَادَ ذَلِكَ فِي مُلْكِي شَيْئًا. O my servants, if the first of you and the last of you, and the humans of you and the jinn of you, all of you were to have the heart of the most pious person amongst all of you, that would have done nothing to increase my kingdom. يا عبادي لو أن أولكم وآخركم وإنسكم وجنكم كانوا على أفجر قلب رجل واحد ما نقص ذلك من ملكي شيئا. And if every single one of you, the first and the last, the humans and the jinn, had the most vile heart of any single one amongst you, every single one amongst you had that most vile heart, that would have done nothing to diminish my kingdom. يا عبادي لو أن أولكم وآخركم وإنسكم وجنكم قاموا في صعيد واحد فسألوني فأعطيت كل إنسان مسألته ما نقص ذلك مما عندي إلا كما ينقص المخيط إذا مدخل البحر. O my servants, know that the first of you and the last of you, if all of you came together to ask of me, and I gave every single person everything that they wanted, every single one of you was given exactly what they wanted, that would do nothing to diminish my kingdom, except as though imagine a needle that's dipped into the water. Imagine the entire ocean, you dip a needle into the water. What would that do to diminish the size of the ocean? Just for you to visualize. Is there anything that's diminished of the kingdom of Allah? He says, إِنَّمَا هِيَ أَعْمَالُكُمْ أُحْصِيهَا لَكُمْ ثُمَّ أُوَفِّيكُمْ إِيَّاهَا فَمَنْ وَجَدَ خَيْرًا فَلْيَحْمَدِ اللَّهَ وَمَنْ وَجَدَ غَيْرَ ذَلِكَ فَلَا يَلُومَنَّ إِلَّا نَفْسَهُ وفي رواية إني حرمت على نفسي الظلم ولا عبادي فلا تظالمون. Then Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says, indeed it is your actions. It is your actions that I am accounting for and I reward you for. So if there is anything that comes of you of punishment, then you have no one to blame except yourself. Then you have no one to blame except yourself. So I go back to examining that assumption that if Allah Azza wa Jalla has created us, then the assumption must be that it must be because He stands to benefit something from it. Or almost as though He is harmed if we do not worship Him. Because this is the assumption when it comes to humanity, that if we ask of something, then we stand to gain something. But you know, even this assumption, when it comes to us as humans, is not a true assumption. Is it the case that every single time we ask of someone, that it is because we have a need for them? Every single time we ask of someone to do something, is it because we have a need? Our free clinic is on what day, Dr. Musa? On Thursday? Okay. So if you stand here and say, come to the free clinic, come to the free clinic, and you offer that care for free, and you commanded the people to come to you, did you stand anything to benefit from that command? When you told the people, come to you. So you have made a request of the people. But who's the person that stands to benefit? The person that comes to you, right? The sick person that comes to you. If a person is drowning, and you command them, grab my hand. You've made a request of them. You've made a command of them. Is it because you need them? Or because they need you? So even that very foundation, that very foundational premise upon which this is built, that if Allah Azza wa Jalla has made a request, then it must be because Allah Azza wa Jalla is in need of that request. From its very foundation is a problematic premise. So Allah Azza wa Jalla doesn't make that command because He is in need of us. Allah says, "In takfuru فإن الله غني عنكم ولا يرضى لعباده الكفر وإن تشكروا يرضى لكم." We mentioned this ayah before actually. So one important thing I want us to talk about is this question. It becomes more and more problematic to people who do not know who Allah is. To not reflect upon the greatness of Allah Azza wa Jalla. To understand that all of creation is in need of Allah. And Allah is not in need of anyone else. To understand that the rotations of the night and the day happens only by the decree of Allah. To understand the precision with which Allah Azza wa Jalla has created the heavens and the earth. And the precision with which He holds everything together. To understand the greatness of Allah Azza wa Jalla, how He gives life to the dead earth after we think it could not be alive again. And He brings forth water and He makes that seed, He makes it split by virtue of that water, and it grows and it becomes this thing that we become dependent upon. That is Allah Azza wa Jal. It is Allah Azza wa Jal who brings forth our creation in the wombs of our mothers, starting from a single fertilized egg. From one fertilized cell, every cell in your body is formed. The neurons in your body are formed. The cardiac muscle is formed. The skin that overlays your bones is formed. Your bones are formed. Your fingernails are formed. Your hairs are formed. All of that, Allah Azza wa Jal brings forth from that single cell. Subhanallah. Fatabarakallahu ahsanul khaliqin. How incredible is Allah Azza wa Jal? How exalted is Allah Azza wa Jal? The most incredible of those who create. So for us to reflect upon the greatness of Allah Azza wa Jal and how we are completely in need of Allah Azza wa Jal, then it makes it easy to understand how we are the only ones that stand to benefit from worshipping Allah Azza wa Jal. So we mentioned here that there are some assumptions that people make in which they compare the Creator to humanity. And the same thing I've heard before when people say, why does Allah Azza wa Jal praise Himself in the Quran? Or why does Allah Azza wa Jal mention His characteristics so much in the Quran? And people will almost say, isn't that a type of arrogance? To praise yourself? To praise yourself? And Allah Azza wa Jal is al-mutakabbir. Allah Azza wa Jal literally calls Himself the Great One. Right? The problem in this assumption is that, again, we think of Allah as we think of the rest of humanity. When one of us praises ourselves, what is the problem in that? If I praise myself or an action I've done and I say, look how great of an action this was. There's two fundamental problems there. The first of them is that no matter what we do, can any one of us say that an action that we've done is perfect? No matter the action, can any one of us say that it was perfect? Every single thing that we do, it has some kind of deficiency. It can always be improved upon. So this is number one. When it comes to humanity, any single thing that we do, it is always characterized by some form of deficiency, by some form of lack of perfection. This is the first way in which we make a false assumption. The second assumption, anything that we do, if I praise myself for an action I've done, could I could anyone ever say that I have done XYZ thing completely independently without ever having to depend on anyone at all at any point in time? No. There's none of us that except that we come into this world completely in need. Every single one of us, the moment we enter the world completely in need. You could never leave a baby and to fend for itself. So the very way in which we enter this world reminds us of how much in need we are, how dependent we are. So anytime you ever praise an action that you've done, understand it always comes from the fact that someone at some point along the way helped you for that action. Now I want us to look at both of these features that exist in humanity. Do they exist in Allah? That first one, that anything we do is characterized by some form of naqs, some form of deficiency. But everything that Allah Azza wa Jal is characterized by perfection through and through. Every decision of Allah Azza wa Jal is characterized by perfection. That second characteristic, that we can never say that we've done anything completely independently, free of need from anyone else. But can Allah Azza wa Jal say that? Absolutely. أنتم الفقراء إلى الله والله غني عنكم. That you are the ones that are in need of Allah Azza wa Jal. But Allah is free of need from all of you. So if Allah Azza wa Jal praises Himself, both of those things that would make it problematic for a human being to praise themselves, none of those apply to Allah. Allah is genuinely deserving of praise. And Allah is genuinely deserving of worship. Allah Azza wa Jal is genuinely deserving of worship. And knowing what we know about Allah, even if we cannot find the purpose behind something in a calamity that we've gone through, something that happens in our life, we don't understand the wisdom behind it. To know that this is a creation of Allah Azza wa Jal, and Allah, by virtue of His perfect characteristics, does not do anything without wisdom, then even when I cannot understand the wisdom myself, I can say that I trust that Allah Azza wa Jal has a perfect wisdom for it. Now, there's a beautiful example I've heard from Sheikh Ahmed al-Sayyid. Some of you guys follow his content online. And the example he gives is, you take a phone, right? You take a phone made by Apple or Android or whatever, and you see some notches on that phone. And you think to yourself, I don't really understand the point of that. But for a second, you go and say like, oh, Apple messed up when they made that carving on the side of the phone. None of you ever think that. Say, oh, that's Apple. They know what they're doing. I don't know what that thing does on the phone, but I know Apple is smart enough to know that it's not doing stupid things to the devices that it's selling you. وَلِلَّهِ مَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى. Allah Azza wa Jal, He has created the entirety of the heavens and the earth. If you see some feature, something that happened in your life and you're struggling to make sense of it, min bab awla, you say, Allah Azza wa Jal has perfect wisdom. I don't understand this thing. I don't understand why there's a notch in my life at this particular moment. But Allah Azza wa Jal, having complete knowledge, complete wisdom, does nothing without that perfect knowledge. So it begs the question then, if we do not worship Allah Azza wa Jal because He is in need of us, then why do we worship Allah? As we touched upon a little bit in the khutbah, do we worship Allah for a feeling? Do we worship Allah for a feeling? Now that feeling that comes when we worship Allah Azza wa Jal. You have a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he says to Bilal, "Arihna biha ya Bilal. Arihna biha ya Bilal." Oh Bilal, bring us comfort, bring us raha by making the call to prayer so that we can find this comfort, right? So it is not a problematic thing that we enjoy the prayer or that we seek that euphoria of Iman. That's not the problem in and of itself, like we touched upon earlier. The problem becomes when you think that this is the entire point of all worship, and you become so dependent on that feeling that when you don't get that feeling, when you're stressed out, when you're worried about XYZ issues in your life, you tell yourself, I don't feel like worshiping Allah. And then you begin to rationalize. Do this retrograde rationale where it's like, oh, the reason why Allah wants us to worship Him is to have a connection with Him and like now have this iman. And so you say, so if I can't feel that, then why worship Allah? We worship Allah because He commanded us to worship Him. Your inability to understand the test does not absolve you from being in the test. You are still here in the test. You are still here. But fundamentally, we worship Allah Azza wa Jal because He is deserving of that worship. When we know who Allah Azza wa Jal is, we understand that He is the one that's deserving of that worship, and He has set up the test like this. He has set up the test like this. And Imam Tahawi, he says in his famous text of theology, says, وَأَصْلُ الْقَدَرِ سِرُّ اللَّهِ فِي خَلْقِهِ. That the foundation of how Allah Azza wa Jal set up everything, why Allah chose to do it in this particular way instead of that particular way, says that is the secret of Allah in His creation. He has told you a certain extent. He has created you to worship Him. But why He has made the test in this way, this is from the wisdom of Allah Azza wa Jal. Whether you understand it or not, does not mean that it was not from Allah's perfect wisdom that He made the test in this way. But there are certain wisdoms that we can gather from this as well. Allah Azza wa Jal, He has created us as well to test us. الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا. He has created you. He says He has created life and death so that He may test you. So that He may test you. Which of you will have the best of actions? Another wisdom from the creation of Allah Azza wa Jal is that you as humanity may have the opportunity and the honor to develop a relationship, a silah, some kind of connection to the Lord of the heavens and the earth. What a beautiful opportunity. So there are many different wisdoms that one can kind of come up with. Another one is that He differentiates us from the rest of creation. That Allah Azza wa Jal tests us in this way, and you are unlike the baha'im, the beasts that go on the earth. So lastly, I'll end on the following point. the one who does not ground himself in the worship of Allah and thinks of this world as purposeless, that we are, just stardust kind of navigating the world around us. There's this famous quote by a popular atheist where he says, "We came from nothing, because of nothing, and we are going to nothing." Now imagine the emptiness of the life that a person who believes this feels. What is the point of any of this? What is the point of any of this? So, lillahi alhamd, we have our religion that endows us with this understanding of the purpose of why we're here. So we're able to live this meaningful life. And so I ask Allah Azza wa Jalla that He enable us to, be firm in our worship of Him, to understand the beautiful wisdom in which He has commanded us to worship Him, and that He allows us to find fulfillment in doing so. هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Okay, so one thing, because we're also here to give condolences to our brother Khalid, for the loss of his daughter Shah. Now we understand that the purpose of our life here is to worship Allah. This is the main purpose why we're here. If that is accomplished, whether we lived in this dunya a day or beyond a day, then having accomplished that purpose, then we've lived a successful life, inshallah. And it is for Allah Azza wa Jalla to test us in any way that He sees fit. So we ask Allah Azza wa Jalla that He gives us the strength to to pass all of those tests that come our way. Inshallah, we have a few minutes for questions or comments. If anybody wants to ask anything or make a point, then the floor is open. And the food is ready. So on that, you have a question for me?
I just need your comment on that, please. You said, why Allah making Salah 2 in the morning or in the evening time?
Yeah.
Why is there such a difference in these Salah?
Yeah.
This is my problem.
So this is a good question. So the question is, why did Allah Azza wa Jalla make certain things, like for example, the Salah, Fajr is 2 rak'ahs, Dhuhr is 4 rak'ahs, Asr is 4 rak'ahs. Why the purpose of these things? And the ulama actually distinguish between different kinds of acts of worship. There are those acts of worship that are mu'allal. You can find the illah in it. Like Allah Azza wa Jalla tells you not to drink alcohol because of what it does to intoxicate, because of what it does to remove a person's mind. But there are other acts of worship where the reason behind doing it a certain way is referred to as not mu'allal, but it's ta'abbud. That it is just sheer submission to Allah Azza wa Jalla. Is there a purpose behind it? Absolutely. Ta'ala Allah anil abath. Allah Azza wa Jalla is exalted beyond doing anything without a purpose, without deliberately. But so there are some things that Allah Azza wa Jalla has not told us the specific reason in doing it, but He has wanted us to submit to that reason. And it is the pleasure of Allah that we do something a certain way. That's why a person can't invent an act of worship to do, because all acts of worship have to do with the pleasure of Allah. And the pleasure of Allah is from the matters of the unseen. We can only know them through what Allah Azza wa Jalla tells us. So these particular acts of worship fall under that which is ta'abbud. Why is Allah 7 times and not 8 times? These are ta'abbud. Allah Azza wa Jalla has commanded them in that way. He has His purpose, but He has not shared the particular purpose. The rida of Allah, the pleasure of Allah, is in it being done in that specific way. And you can draw maybe a general wisdom from this, not in particular to each one of those acts of worship. And that is that you as a servant are commanded to come to Allah as He wants you to come to Him. It is not for you to set the terms of how you wish to come to Allah. He is the master, we're the servant. So in acknowledgement of that, he makes tawaf 7 or 70 times, or he makes dhuhr 1 rak'ah or 15 rak'ahs or whatever. All of that would have been for him to do. For us to understand that we submit to Allah. It is for him to command his creation as he wishes. If there's nothing else, then هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله وسلم